Please turn to page 324 for Stage 10 Argumentative Essays. On page 324 is the process students need to walk through for writing an argument. That always begins with the argument. I always say, what kind of argument is this? Pick the type of argument. Policy, issue, claim. Maybe a new policy was just developed at the school that students no longer can use their lockers. It's debatable, meaning that it's perfect for an argument. You have two sides. You could have an argument about an issue or a claim as well. As long as it's debatable, there are two sides to it. First, an argument that is presented to the students. We'll identify what kind of argument that is, and then what do? We are judges. We are not going to jump to conclusions. We are in the courtroom, and we're going to be objective and fair, which means take in their reasons and examine their evidence before we choose a side, before we make a decision. Many different sources of information, sources that are for and sources that are against this policy, this issue, this claim. Primary sources, they could be secondary sources, they could be tertiary sources. What do the sources provide us? They will provide us with reasons that are for or against the argument. We have to understand the reasons, we have to analyze the reasons, and evaluate the reasons in order to determine if they make sense, if they truly back up for or against that argument. You can't just say, here's my reason. You have to back it up, back it up, back it up. You have to have evidence to back up that reason. You, the judge, need to look at that evidence to make sure that it's convincing and credible. Where is this evidence coming from? Is it coming from a certain person, author, a group, an organization? And when I look at that person, author, group, organization, I'm first going to look at, are they trustworthy? Are they honest? How are they viewed from their peers? What is their reputation? Also, I'm going to look at their accomplishments, their experience, and their expertise and credentials. I'm interrogating the evidence. I make sure it's convincing and credible, and that it backs my reason for my argument. This is what we're doing before we even write our paper. In stage 9, when we were learning bat tree, just how to write a 2-paragraph argument, we went through this whole process in detail. This is a review and a reminder of what the children need to do. Research, and this is the process with our sources, for and against that argument. They are going to list down all that information that they need to show the reason and the evidence, but they have to cite it and they have to analyze it and evaluate that reason and evidence. They need to have at least 6 different sources, 3 for each side, in which they're recording on their sheet. Once they have all this information recorded, then they're going to choose a side. That's when they, as the judge, look at both sides and decide, which am I for or against this argument? Once they decide on that, then they're ready to write. And that's where we're using what we learned at stage 9, bat tree, that anachronism, as their format to identify the elements necessary to write their argument. The B is background, A is argument, and the tree is going to be transition, reason, evidence, explain your evidence. Let's look at our essay format down here. We have, first of all, a sheet with all the directions and steps that students follow. The top box here is the introduction, the middle is the body, and the bottom is the conclusion box. These are the steps that the students follow in order to fill out their organizer. And their organizer has 1, 2, 3, 4 lines. The top box is the introduction, the middle is the body, and the bottom is the conclusion. Students easily make this organizer on their own. 1, 2, 3, 4 lines. They have the B and the A for their introductory paragraph. In the middle, they have 3 trees, 3 different main idea paragraphs in this body. That means 3 different reasons to back up the argument and at least 1 piece of evidence for each reason. At the bottom is our conclusion statement, repeating the argument in different words. And finally, that snappy ending. Our introductory paragraph, we already learned, the B and the A, from stage 9. The tree, we learned tree in stage 9. In stage 10, we're just going to add 2 more. We know how those elements work, we're just adding more. And finally, at the bottom, we have our conclusion. Our conclusion, we're just going to repeat that argument. And our snappy ending, telling your reader, if you agree with my argument, the side that I've taken, here's the benefits of agreeing with me. If you disagree with my side, I'm going to write a warning of consequences that could happen to you if you don't agree with my position in my argument. We have our essay format, which is an extension of stage 9. If your students have not walked through the steps of stage 9, I highly suggest that you go back, you watch that video, and you go through stage 9 steps, because that's where they're going to learn the whole process of researching, choosing a side, and learning battery in order to write out their argument. Once they have that process down and they're writing those 2-paragraph arguments, then you are ready to pull them to stage 10. On page 325, we need to pick the argument, policy, issue, or a claim. Here was the argument written down. Cell phones are valuable educational tools. This argument is a claim. Don't take a side. We are heading into the courtroom and you are going to be the judge. We need to have many sources that we research, and we're going to record our research on our for and against papers. Students would have 2 sheets of paper, or this would be a front and back duplicated copy, where one side says for, other paper or reverse side would say against the argument. This is an example of a completed for side. The sources that were for cell phones being educational tools. We have our box where we have our research. Research is when the students are going to different sources, finding in those sources reasons for or against the argument, and they record the reason from that evidence, and they also record evidence in that box. They're going to look at the citations, and they're also going to look at the author, group, organization that is providing this evidence, whether it's credible, convincing, and makes sense. So when they do that, they're looking at the date, they're looking at what the organization is, they're looking at all that information about whether they're trustworthy, honest, credible, whether they have the experience, whether they have credentials to back up this evidence. So I will have 6 to 8 envelopes, and in each envelope I will label its source. Each table group will have one source. Read the source to identify reasons to support or to go against the argument, and then find evidence and analyze that evidence to see if it's credible or convincing. They love the idea of being investigative teams. The judge is hiring you to be an investigative team. That means this is a job. Take out your source, and it was an article written by an educator about cell phones in the classroom. They would analyze this information first, just beginning with, when was this article written? Who wrote this? Are they trustworthy? Are they honest? Do they have the credentials, the experience, accomplishments to write this article and make these claims about cell phones? Then they're going to read to find reasons for or against the argument and evidence to back it up. On page 326, these are the directions and steps students are going to follow once they're ready to write their arguments. The top box is our introduction steps, which have a hook, some way to grab the reader's attention. After you pull your reader in, then you want to provide them with background. I have to tell you about this argument, this policy, issue, or claim. Once I give the background, then I present you with my argument and the 3 reasons that are going to back up that argument. Then we go to our body, and our body is, T is our transition. R is our reason. Give a reason to back up your argument, and it better make sense. Okay. So you provide your reason. Once you provide your reason, then you have the students say, back it up, I need evidence to back up your reason. So then they have to have their evidence, providing convincing and credible evidence from their source. And then you have your final E, which is, explain it. What does that evidence mean? How does that evidence support your reason to support your argument? What does it mean? Explain that evidence. You're going to repeat the tree 3 different times. At the bottom, we have our conclusion. We're going to repeat the thesis statement and highlight the reasons and evidence from the body. That means a quick review, not go back and rewrite the whole paper. So you're highlighting key points. And you may want to go back on your brainstorm and just highlight what those key points are before you go to your conclusion. And finally, our snappy ending, which will end with a general warning of the consequences if you don't agree with my side, and the benefits if you do agree. There's all the elements and the steps that you're going to walk through when you write your argument. On page 327 at the top, I have a checklist. When your students have their final copy of their argument, you can go back and use this as your checklist to evaluate their papers for the content and organization, their sentences, and mechanics. Down below is a sample organizer from the argument we posed, which was, cell phones are valuable instructional tools. The students did not jump to conclusions. Instead, we broke out into our investigative teams. Each team had a source, and from those sources that were for and against this claim, we had them report them out. Students then recorded reasons and evidence for and against the claim that cell phones are an educational tool, and decided that they were going to be for the cell phones. The first time you actually walk through an essay, stick with just one side so that together you can all fill in this organizer. Once you've gone through one organizer, the next time they can choose whichever side they want. This was an argument for agreeing with and for cell phones being instructional tools. Notice on this organizer, this student wrote more. They have more phrases. They don't have all complete sentences, but they have a lot of phrases and ideas written down more in words. Words, phrases, or brief sentences are fine, whatever works for the students. I'm showing you an example of a student who wanted to write out a little bit more on their organizer. I let students do what works for them. Once students have their organizers filled in, they are going to orally rehearse them over and over and over again. And once they've orally rehearsed them, then go to the computer in order to write your paper. A computer enables you to delete, add, move around items. Let's go to the next page to see our final published piece of writing. Here we have our published piece of writing, Cell Phones in the Classroom. Our first paragraph is our introduction. Our last paragraph is our conclusion. And then we had 1, 2, 3 trees, main idea paragraphs, supporting our argument. After students circle their introduction, identify their body paragraphs in their conclusion, they would go back and label the elements in the introduction, the transition, reason, evidence, and explain the evidence, your tree, in each one of your main idea paragraphs. You would label those, and then you would have your conclusion and your snappy ending. For more detailed directions on how to circle and label the parts, just go to the Revise and Edit chapter in your manual, go to that video, and I will walk through the steps of how to circle and label all the parts of an argumentative essay. Finally, at the bottom of our paper is your bibliography, where you are citing your sources of information that you presented in your argument. This is Stage 10, Writing an Argumentative Essay. I hope you're able to use all of these steps and this process so your students can write arguments where they are thinking at high levels by analyzing and evaluating sources to support their arguments. Good luck, and I hope you enjoy it.